Well, as I'm sure you know, it was only last week that 5 Just Stop Oil activists were handed historically long jail sentences for blocking the M25 back in November 2022, in which prosecutors alleged that the protests led to an economic cost of over £750,000.
Well, wildlife presenter Chris Packham was at the court on Friday and described the jail sentences as judicial thuggery. And Chris joins us now. Good morning to you.
Morning.
You aren't happy about these sentences that they were given at all, are you?
I'm not happy at all, no, Susanna, simply because I feel that they're unduly punitive. We see people who are committing violent crimes. We see people that are committing sexual offences getting less time than these protesters. They are the canaries in the coal mine. And I would ask you to think that whilst they have caused a disruption, whilst they do annoy people, in terms of the amount of damage that they're doing to the environment and people's lives, it pales into insignificance compared to that that's been done by our fossil fuel giants that are continuing to fill our atmosphere full of carbon dioxide and radically change the world's climate. So I think we just need to keep things in perspective. And one other thing I need to be very clear about is that the laws which have punished these protesters are not specific to climate activism. They could be implemented at any time to persecute and prosecute people who might want to complain about gender rights, trans rights, the right to strike. It could be anything. So we have a broader concern about the way that the judiciary is acting and the way that these laws are being implemented.
Yes, I mean, but it's not just, is it, a debate about free speech and the right to protest. We all accept that those are very important values that we want to preserve in this country, around the world if we could. It's the tactics that were used. And as the judge pointed out, you know, you had ambulances that couldn't get to A&E units. You had people seeking extremely important cancer treatment who couldn't make their appointments and had to defer their appointments. I mean, this wasn't just about standing somewhere with a megaphone and delivering a message, which many people agree with. It was the way that that message was delivered. It wasn't just a nuisance or mild disruption. It caused real problems for real people who, many of whom, agreed with what the protesters were actually saying but not doing.
I think 3 things there, Richard. Firstly, let's not forget what happened last week, where a tiny IT blip caused a worldwide shutdown of computers, which inconvenienced people far greater than this. The M25 is pretty much a car park as we speak, I imagine, so people will be missing appointments, so on and so forth. Nevertheless, of course, we manifest sympathies for all of those people who were inconvenienced. But let's think about something else. A few weeks ago, 2 more Just Stop Oil protesters threw some cornstarch over Stonehenge. It was all over the media. Everyone focused upon that and was condemning that protest because it's a national monument which we love and treasure. The following Saturday, I and others put 100,000 people on the streets of London, you know, in the largest march before our election to highlight our concerns for biodiversity loss, and it was covered by none of the media. If you guys don't actually get the message across and only focus on the means of protest, then of course protesters will have to escalate their protest. And that's what we want to do. To make sure that peaceful, direct protest is properly covered by the media.
I just want to say, you know, we do a lot here to talk about climate change. Laura, our weather presenter, has been talking about the fact that it's climate emergency today. She's got a clock ticking, counting down on her desk right now, showing people very visibly about that. So, you know, we do kind of cover that things as well. But I think in this particular one,
Susanna,
though...
you do.
It's Charlotte, by the way.
There is no doubt, Susanna, that you
us.
do a great job, and this is always at the forefront of your conversation. You're very kindly inviting me onto your programme to talk about it today. I'm not criticising your programme. I'm speaking about the media more broadly. But ultimately, if we don't have the right for free, peaceful, democratic protest in this country, remember, it's about everything, not just climate activism, then I think we are compromising our democracy, and that's a serious, very serious issue.
Are you right to define it as peaceful, though, what actually happened on the M25 over those 4 days? Because many would say that it wasn't peaceful. It had, as I said in my opening question to you, direct and severe impact on ordinary men and women going about their business. So it wasn't peaceful in that sense, and also it was flipping dangerous. I mean, what the protesters were doing in terms of taking risks with their own lives was pretty up there, if I can use that expression. And what do you make of their demeanour in court? This wasn't reported very much, but it's a fact that all of the defendants shouted over the judge quite a lot, very disruptive. I think there were 9 rearrests in court because of their behaviour. And that seemed to send a message that they had absolutely no respect for the legal system and for the laws by which we all have to run our lives.
Well, I would say that the legal respect is showing the legal profession is showing no respect for the UK public at the moment. The reason that they interrupted that court case is because they were forbidden from saying what had motivated their protest in the first place. That's like a criminal, not having to say why they committed a crime. The second thing is that the jury were forbidden to acquit them on the basis of their conscience. And this is something that's been enshrined in UK law since the 1600s, Richard. We are looking at an erosion of our democracy here outside of anything to do with climate activism and inconvenience. We're thinking more broadly about the way that the law is being implemented and the judiciary are responding to it. And that is something which is very serious, not just for those climate activists or the people that were inconvenienced, but for every single one of us in this country who at some point might want to stand up and peacefully protest about something which aggrieves them.
Just one more question on this, and then we do want to talk about so-called wildlife tourism. It's a really interesting points that you've got to make on that. But setting aside whether you think the sentences were fair or not, do you believe that they will have acted as a deterrent and that we won't see something like the M25 protest again?
When I speak to prominent politicians, they harbour a real fear that if we don't listen to these peaceful, non-violent protests, then they will escalate. So I'm afraid that they may not act as a deterrent, unfortunately, which is a shame, because what we do want is the ability for every one of us in this country to be able to democratically complain about something which aggrieves us without the risk of going to jail for 5 years. But I do think that given the scale of the problem that we're talking about here, climate breakdown, and we can see the impositions of this, as you've already highlighted, you're featuring it on your programme. We watch flooding and burning, displacement of people, food prices rising, and catastrophic weather events in our own country. I think those protests will continue, and I think very sadly they will probably escalate.
Chris, something else that I know you want to talk about this morning is this issue of wildlife tourism. And we've got this statistic, haven't we? 1 in 3 Brits have seen animal cruelty. That's more than 17 million when they're abroad.